Amadeus makes the experience of travel better for everyone everywhere by inspiring innovation, partnerships, and responsibility to people, places, and planet. Our technology powers the travel and tourism industry, inspiring more open ways of working, more connected ways of thinking, centered around the traveler. Our open platform connects the global travel and hospitality ecosystem, from startups to big industry players and governments too. Together, redesigning the travel of tomorrow. Amadeus, it's how travel works. Visit us to know more, amadeus.com.
Hello and welcome to the Skift India Travel Podcast. I'm Peden Doma, Bhutia, Skift Asia editor. And today, joining me is Amir Golbarg, Senior Vice President for Middle East, Africa and India at Minor Hotels. With a focus on India's ever-growing hospitality landscape, we are excited to hear about Minor Hotels' ambitious expansion plans and their insights into this thriving market. Amir, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Likewise, a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Amir, let's just dive right in. Minor Hotels has set a very ambitious target for its expansion in India. You entered India in 2017 with your Oaks property in Bodh Gaya in Bihar. And now you plan to open 50 hotels in 10 years. You have an Anantara Jaipur coming up later this year. So what is the driving force behind this strategy?
I mean, it's quite evident now looking at the market, and in particular India from an economic perspective. It is the absolute right time for us to focus on India, and it's been on the radar for many years. We've been blessed with a lot of outbound tourism from the Indian market. It actually represents a major growth for the company, in particular during the now post-COVID era, both across the Middle East, Asia, and Indian Ocean. So it's been a major focus of ours, and we've been quite blessed with a lot of demand requested, in particular from our Anantara brand, being very, very driven around indigenous sustainable luxury, which resonates a lot with where the Indian market is going towards. And the maturity is starting to really evolve now with the Indian owners, developers, and in particular with the infrastructure and developments in India. So for us, it's about timing. It's about really a re-emphasized focus for us. And now we believe that it's the right time to go in all guns blazing and establish both a footprint from an office perspective and set up some very steep targets that we are confident we're going to achieve over the coming 10 years.
You mentioned all guns blazing, and I was thinking from 1 to 50 is definitely all guns blazing, nothing short of that. Amir, of course, we've heard a lot of hotel operators coming into India and talking about the highly underpenetrated market of Indian hospitality. Recently, the Accor CEO was here, the Hyatt CEO was here in India, and they all talked about the fact how the Indian market, hospitality market, is so underpenetrated. So can you also talk about the unique opportunities that arise from operating in an underpenetrated market like India, and also how does Minor Hotels plan to navigate, the unique opportunities, of course, and the challenges presented by the Indian hospitality market?
I think one of the greatest privileges we've had is there's been a lot of first movers ahead of us. There's been a lot of companies who've come, entered, failed, redone, re-strategized, and relaunched themselves in the Indian market. I think we've taken a lot of learning from that. And whilst 1 to 50 sounds like an extreme target to achieve, I actually believe that we're being quite conservative towards what we could do if we were really to go in and capitalize on all the opportunities in the market in India. In contrary with some of the other gentlemen that you rightfully mentioned and their appetite for India, we're actually coming in a little bit more conservative. We've realized that in order to grow our footprint in India, we need to focus on building the right strategic partnerships over assets. And that's been our strategy in the Middle East and other parts of the world as well. That for us, it's much more important to tie up with the right partners than to elevate ourselves with a number of assets and keys that we penetrate the market with. So we haven't committed number of keys. We haven't looked at it from that perspective. So we're looking at now, the next step for us was, let's invest ahead of time, set up an office in Bangalore, bring in a team on the ground that will then work slowly and diligently with potential partners on building up a sustainable footprint. And when I use the word sustainability, I always say to people, I said, whichever way you want to turn ESG and sustainability, it starts with the economics. Because if you build up a sustainable economy, everything else will last will last sustainably longer. So from our perspective, that's a bigger piece that we're looking at. So we took that into consideration and we said, over the next 3 to 5 years, what do we need to do to establish a strong enough footprint with a smaller number of key to prove our worth into the Indian market and to domestic travelers, and obviously to partners, that then we can then exorbitantly escalate that over the final 5 years of that tenure. So over the next 5 years, we're actually looking at not a rapid expansion, but then by proving ourselves into the market, by winning over the trust of both the domestic partners, the obviously more importantly, the team members that are hopefully going to be hiring, building employer branding, building a sustainable business that's going to give sufficient returns to the investors. That through that we can then exorbitantly escalate our footprint in the latter part of the 5 years.
Interesting. So it's more about quality over quantity for minor right now, as far as the India expansion is concerned. Um, Amir, I wanted to understand something. You have a hotel in Eastern India in Bodh Gaya. There's one hotel that's coming up in Northern India in Jaipur. But you chose to open an office in Bangalore. So are you also looking at the South India market very, do you think, because of course, Bangalore is very near to all the touristy destinations of Kerala, Goa and other places. So are you also looking at that market as well?
Absolutely. I think for us, we if we start breaking down India, I mean, it is such a blessed country in terms of geography, in terms of landscape, and in terms of offerings. And I think we're following now very closely, the investments that are being put into infrastructure into the country, into the airports, into the road infrastructure, and looking at how is that moving forward. And we want to now look at what are the newer markets that we can penetrate. The North Indian market has historically been where most hotel companies have established their base. It's where Gurgaon and other parts that usually would be the expectation. We believe that whilst that is a key market, and of course we have to lay a presence there, and I think the closest we could say that obviously we've signed in Rajasthan, and we believe a lot more in Rajasthan would be a potential, but we see a huge untapped potential in the southern part of India. And I think that's for us also looking at what the infrastructure developments coming in, but a lot of investments as well, of a lot of Indians abroad coming back into India with a lot of investments as well, particularly if you look at a lot of the successful businesses that have evolved with Indian businessmen in the UAE in particular. Majority is from the southern Indian parts. So I think there is a huge opportunity in that space. And looking at areas such as outside of Bangalore, there's a beautiful place called Kurk. We see a huge potential there as well. In the southern piece of India, obviously there's a lot of areas untapped. So we are definitely looking at not only where you traditionally would have your footprint, as most operators would do, but how can we come and add value to the new infrastructure developments and to put new destinations on the map. Historically, that's been one of the DNAs that Minor has always brought in when we entered new destinations. We like creating new destinations. We don't like to follow suit where everybody else has been. And I think India has probably, in today's economy globally, probably one of the greatest potentials to start penetrating new destination developments and to work closely with the local ministries of tourism and the local tourism bodies, and really start penetrating these new destinations and work with them in building a new hotspots in other parts of untapped India. And I'm mentioning in particular, if you look at wildlife sanctuaries, there are some of the most stunning sites, and I've had the privilege to visit a number of these. And we have an incredible portfolio of tented camps and lodges across Africa, in particular across Eastern Africa and Central and Southern Africa. So we definitely see a potential in that space, and there's a lot of that in the central to southern part of India. And of course, if you go up north, there's then obviously the wellness and the whole Ayurvedic element as well. So there is a multitude of different angles that we believe that are untapped in the Indian country that for us would be of value as part of our development pipeline.
Okay, so perhaps that's where when I spoke to you for my story, you spoke about the emerging destinations bit, right? So that also takes care of minor trying to look into emerging destinations rather than go where everyone is going.
Absolutely. And that, I believe, is going to set us apart from a lot of the other major operators who probably would look at the low hanging fruit, which, quite common would be, the destinations that everybody enters, the key of it, Rajasthan, be it, in Mumbai, Delhi, etc.
Yeah, and I think it also helps a lot in countering over tourism as well. I mean, if people are going, if you are creating infrastructure in new places, then perhaps people would go to visit those places, right?
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that, and I'm quite fond of speaking about this because I believe this really is part of our responsible tourism, is that when we build up a new property and when we start putting up the flag ahead of that time, when we've signed the agreement and we start looking into that destinations, and you will see that in particular with the Anantara brand, our biggest focus is not the hotel. And you will see that if you look at our website, the way we build up the brand and the destination, we focus around 80% of our efforts towards the destination and 20% the property. By doing so, that really helps as well the domestic tourism, supports in the local communities, building up local businesses so that they can support collectively with us in building up a new destination. And that's the indigenous part of what we've been doing historically. And I think that resonates as well with our commitment from an ESG perspective to ensuring that when we enter a new destination, we need to know what we can give back before we start taking. And that resonates in particular when you deal with destinations that are untapped in India. That I believe we can add a lot more value in these destinations, and I see a lot of appetite from a lot of local artisans, craftsmen, and some incredible flora, fauna, and artistries that we can incorporate from design, construction, marketing, PR, and obviously all the way through the operating assets.
Amadeus makes the experience of travel better for everyone everywhere by inspiring innovation, partnerships, and responsibility to people, places, and planet. Our technology powers the travel and tourism industry, inspiring more open ways of working, more connected ways of thinking, centered around the traveler. Our open platform connects the global travel and hospitality ecosystem, from startups to big industry players and governments too, together redesigning the travel of tomorrow. Amadeus, it's how travel works. Visit us to know more, amadeus.com.
That's fascinating. I mean, could you tell us a little bit more about how minor hotels, your approach to the India's hospitality sector, particularly in terms of the kind of properties that you're selecting and your market positioning?
I mean, it's interesting because there's I think there's a space for everyone because of the ever growing markets that we have. But I think we've seen that with the rise in income, when in particular the domestic purchasing power has been a significant growth and the domestic demand is significantly increasing. We believe and that in the, I would say, upscale, upper upscale, up to luxury, there's a major shortage in demand. So our first focus is going to be in that space, and it's going to be much less about you know tangible assets, but a lot more about experiential tourism and looking at in that luxury space with the Anantara brand in particular. And I'm being very cautious with the Anantara because I don't believe that there's going to be room for more than potentially 10, 12 of Anantaras in the right destinations. But strategically positioning Anantara in destinations where we can really create some experiential attachments both to the property, but more importantly to the community. So that's going to be a very strategic location where we're going to put the Anantara. Now, the Jaipur destination was the first one. The reason for that was more so than just a wedding destination. I believe the Jaipur and the Pink City and Rajasthan has such a tremendous history. And there's so much more we can add to that. And one of the first things I said when we entered in this, and we obviously visited a number of hotels, was everybody is focusing on the wedding business. Because obviously I understand that's where the money sits. That's where everybody is securing themselves financially. But there is so much more to offer. And for me, my goal for India is in once hopefully we sit here in 10 years from now and we've delivered on our promise and our vision, is that when somebody arrives to India, be it domestic or international, or an Indian abroad who's coming back into India to experience their country, is that we have strategically positioned our assets in a manner that you don't just come for Jaipur for a wedding or for a stay. You have a series of choices, like we do in Africa, that you have your journey all across India. So it becomes part of a journey. So you have, the traditional the traditional triangle. You visit your Agra, Delhi, Jaipur, but then you expand that into Rishikesh. You expand that into Ayurvedic experiences. You go down south to the Indian Ocean, where you have stunning sights to explore as well. So every one of these, in our opinion, has to be positioned in a manner that they complement each other over the coming years. So that's going to be a very important focus. So that's the one piece, is really complementing assets that creates average length of stay for any inbound that comes into India. And with the support that we're getting now from Air India, the infrastructure of airports, we believe there's going to be a huge support in terms of infrastructure of network that's going to help us achieve this goal. The next step, I think, that's going to be instrumental is looking at the young the young population of the country. We're blessed with a country that's representing 28.7 years. I saw is the medium age, which is incredible. You don't find that in many countries. So how can we penetrate a lot more into the lifestyle? And that's where the Avani and the Avani Plus would be of unique offerings. I see India as, beside obviously the major hubs, there's a major lack in these hotels, and focusing on creating a lot more destination experiences on the F&B side, on the beach clubs, on creating more unique offerings with wellness, sustainability, and making them a lot more integrated. So when people come, they don't want to leave. And that creates itself, a lot of demand, both from the domestic and international. So I believe that's a space that's massively undertapped in India. Again, most people have been looking at low-hanging fruits. They haven't looked at how can we start penetrating and tapping into these trends where the Indian economy is going towards, and how can we make sure that the young travelers don't only come to Dubai and have their fun, but in India there are plenty of places where you could do pretty much the same that you would do here.
That's fantastic that you are kind of acknowledging the diversity and the complexity of the India market. Of course, you spoke about the fact that you've been talking about your brands, bringing your brands like Anantara and Avani and NH Collection to India. So these would be the upper upscale and the luxury hotel segments. Of course, you spoke about the fact that India has a young population. It's the most populous country in the world right now. And then, of course, there is India's growing domestic buying power as well. So, which has, of course, kind of changed the luxury travel market. And if I may quote from your release, that you've spoken about how India is a very big market for the Anantara brand, the international source market. You have said that you feel that I think 72% was the growth rate that you had in annual room nights from Indian tourists, right, in Asia and the Middle East. So, what trends do you see, foresee kind of shaping the future growth of this luxury travel market from and in India?
It's interesting. We not having a single operating Anantara in India, and yet seeing a
Mhm.
72% growth in that market. It speaks for itself. It speaks that the demand is definitely there. But I think what we're seeing more and more of is as well, and that's where the world is going in that direction. But India is fast tracking every element on that. Is really looking at how can we penetrate a lot more into the growing demand of leisure, business and leisure combined. And that's most of our hotels are geared in that direction. How can we make sure that multi-generational travel is catered for? That for us is absolute critical. We've been blessed with multi-generational travel growing, but in India it is even more fast-paced. And I think
Yeah, the
there's
whole
not
family traveling, the one that you talk
family
about, where
travel.
the
Correct.
grandparents, parents, and the children travel together.
Absolutely. And what's interesting? There's not a lot of offerings in terms of villas, pool villas, rooms that have interconnecting zipper kings and offering facilities that cater for families that are traveling together. You're coming on business, you bring your family, you're doing a bit of business, leisure, and family travel combined. There is such a huge demand there. And for us, a number of the projects we're now actively reviewing in India, that's the first thing we're telling them. I said, forget about the traditional rooms, beds, and layouts that you had in your hotels. Let's come in and start focusing on that space. Let's focus on building some unique branded residences and villas and making that more of an attractive proportion. With that, branded resi is becoming more and more in demand. I mean, in this part of the world is booming at the moment. In India, it's still very early days, and we
Yes.
believe that there is enough purchasing power and enough demand for people that may look at that may looking at multi different spaces where they can use both for their families, but also they can invest in a home. They can invest in a home, put it into a hotel pool, and as and when they would like to come in, that's an option they have. And we've tied that up in a number of destinations with our timeshare business. We have a very luxurious high-end timeshare business called Anantara Vacation Club that offers as well these solutions where you can come, you invest in a unit, that unit gives you opportunities of traveling abroad and experiencing and back home as well. And we believe that's another space that we would definitely look at. So the branded resi space, larger units and villas that offers and caters for multi-generational travel, tying that up with offerings of selling and leasing back units, but also more importantly, in tying in what are the experiences you can add on the property itself. So for us, adventure tourism is a big element. We actually looked at one of the properties that we're potentially launching soon in India of adding in, something called the Go Aping experience. We know which covers from a 3-year-old all the way to a 50-year-old having activities on the side, pulling them out of the house and making a little bit more of an experiential journey around visiting a destination. And that would potentially be the first in India if that goes live. Because we believe that, again, we're quite blessed. A lot of people post COVID are now looking for a lot more outdoors experiences rather than just being inside in a room or in a house. And we need to offer that as an offering as well. So combining that with the adventure element, the culture element, which is significant, and it's interesting how many Indians themselves don't know a lot of their own history and heritage, not to mention us who travel into India, because it's just not been emphasized enough in the past. And everybody, were more interested of traveling abroad and enjoying Rome and Nice and Cannes and Dubai, but now suddenly realizing what an incredible heritage and history we have. So that's a big focus of ours. And of course, the birthplace of Ayurveda and wellness is such a big focus of ours. We were blessed enough that we started this journey in the spa and wellness space way ahead of most companies. We started this journey when the inception of the Anantara brand in 2001. And a lot of what we do overseas is inspired by the Indian traditional medicine. So now, being privileged enough to come back in, that's going to be a major focus of ours. Is how can we create more longevity hubs? How can we incorporate that into the experiences, taking yoga into authenticity of where yoga came from? And a lot of that is definitely part of the journey that we believe that we can add more value to the Indian country and the Indian communities as well.
Yes, I mean, you've mentioned about earlier that about the fact that you're targeting opportunities in Ayurvedic wellness retreats, right?
Mhm.
And recently, Skift did a feature on how the generation Z, that we call them, is obsessed with sleep, and we did a feature on sleep tourism. So this would also be an ideal opportunity for anyone who wants to unwind and just relax and just sleep it off, right?
Absolutely. And I believe, this all comes as, and as a larger solution. Just adding in, the sleep function itself doesn't add value. You need to look at the mindfulness, the rest and self improvement, the longevity element, so that whole element with the culinary tied in, it needs to be a journey. Guests that come in, and that's one of the things I think a lot of people are missing out on. They add them as tick boxes. They look at it and they say, because it takes a lot of guts for a hotel company or for a developer to invest in all out. People want to be everything for everybody, but reality they're nothing for nobody. And that for me is a big element. If we want to do something, you have to do it wholeheartedly. You have to believe in it. So for me, the sleep tourism is part of a much broader context of the wellness piece. And
Mhm.
it's become really a big story as well post COVID. I think there is a big need for it. But we don't want to just do it as a one off and offer rooms that cater for it. But it adds in with the whole holistic experience that you add on property. And the culinary is a major part of that. And I think it's a massive under-tap opportunity in India as well. You go to a lot of hotels, and sad to say, I've stayed in a lot of hotels in India, but not a lot of them have a renewed emphasis on culinary. We've had some of the older properties who've had the names that are legacy names passing on, but not a lot have reinvented themselves. And some of the best global chefs at the moment, be it from the best restaurants in Dubai to Bangkok, are Indian chefs. It's interesting. So for us, we tied up with a number of these. We do definitely believe that that's a big market, and we're working closely with some of these top chefs to look at how can we work much closer with our developments in the Indian market. And that becomes also from, we've launched vegan rooms now in our NH collection in Dubai Palm. How can we bring that across? We looked at, we operate some hotels that are also catering much more into the non-alcoholic, so from unique mocktails, juices, and juicing experiences, to try and, I would say, tease with a bit of people's minds and start looking at from a different perspective. Personally, I can tell you, I've been a carnivore my whole life, but when I've come to India, I've started to appreciate, the vegetarian, the vegan a lot more. And you start really dwelling into it, and you start realizing gut health is the single biggest concern that starts, especially when you reach your 40s and above, because of stress, because of lifestyle, because of culinary, and gut health is, unfortunately, one of the elements that hits across your entire body. So if we start looking at some of the incredible spices, some of the incredible offerings that you have in India, and the emphasis that they have on the personal well-being and the health, how can we use that both domestically and abroad? So for me, that's a big learning I've had. And again, another eye-opener that, when I speak to a lot of my fellow Indian colleagues and friends, they themselves are surprised, say, well, you're more Indian than me. I said, no, I'm just investing in what you have. And that for me is very important. And I believe a lot more people need to know about this.
Absolutely, and that's a very interesting take. Of course, I think food tourism is there in India, but it is not, it's not spearheaded by hotels. Like you said, there aren't too many hotels that have very prominent restaurants. Of course, some of the star properties may be having, but it's not known really for food. No, thank you, Amir. Thank you for sharing these insights into, Minor Hotel's expansion strategy in India. And it's clear from what you've said that India holds immense promise for the hospitality industry, and Minor Hotels is definitely seems keen to play a significant role in shaping its future.
Indeed. No, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. We're excited to collaborate with you and hopefully achieve and beyond.
Thank you so much. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the Skift India Travel Podcast on your favorite listening app. Have a great day ahead.
This has been the Skift India Travel Podcast. Thank you for listening.